Welcome to Bible Reader Companion. Our Bible reading this week is 1 Corinthians chapters 5 through 14, and our memory verse is 1 Corinthians chapter 9 and verse 27, which reads this way in the New King James. But I discipline my body and bring it under subjection, lest, when I have preached to others, I myself should become disqualified. As we bring this week to a close, I want to look at an issue that Paul addresses with the Corinthians that can easily affect any of us. And that is a section beginning in 1 Corinthians chapter 10. He begins, and just before this, he's been talking about how the people of Israel had fallen prey to idolatry. And even in spite of all that God had done for them, they fell prey to idolatry. And so beginning in verse 12, he says, 1 Corinthians 10, beginning in verse 12, New King James Version. Therefore let him who thinks he stands take heed lest he fall. No temptation has overtaken you except such as is common to man. God is faithful, who will not allow you to be tempted beyond what you are able, but with the temptation will also make the way of escape, that you may be able to bear it. Therefore, my beloved, flee from idolatry. I speak to you as wise men. Judge for yourselves what I say. The cup of blessing which we bless, is it not the communion of the blood of Christ? The bread which we break, is it not the communion of the body of Christ? For we, though many, are one bread and one body, for we all partake of that one bread. Observe Israel after the flesh. Are not those who eat of the sacrifices partakers of the altar? What am I saying then? That an idol is anything, or what is offered to idols is anything? Rather, that the things which the Gentiles sacrifice, they sacrifice to demons and not to God. And I do not want you to have fellowship with demons. You cannot drink the cup of the Lord and the cup of demons. You cannot partake of the Lord's table and of the table of demons. Or do we provoke the Lord to jealousy? Are we stronger than he? It's interesting because Paul would go on to talk about the idea of something we talked about yesterday, and that is the idea of eating meat. But here, the context changes. The context changes to eating that same meat sitting in an idol's temple. It's interesting that he starts this off by talking about pride, and let him who thinks he stands take heed lest he fall. It's easy for us, as perhaps these brethren did, to look at the Israelites and say, hey, those people, they had their problems and they made their mistakes, but I'm not going to be that way. And yet clearly here were people who had such arrogance that they thought that they could go and associate with those in an idol's temple and not be affected. And Paul says, look, you can't have fellowship with both. You can't have fellowship with Christ and fellowship with demons. When you go sit in that idol's temple and partake of that and eat of that meat in the idol's temple, you're worshiping that idol and you're partaking of that. And you are becoming idolatrous. And what happens is we don't see it. We become so arrogant. We become so full of our righteousness and who we are and how great we think we are and how right we think we are, that we can't see that we are primed for a fall. One of the things we always have to do as a Christian is be on the alert, be on the lookout, be aware of the danger that exists and not assume that we are so strong or we are so righteous that we cannot fall prey to the temptations that Satan has to offer. Let us be careful who we fellowship with. Let us be careful of engaging in the affairs of the world. At the same time, we proclaim to engage in the affairs of Christ. Am I saying that we can't do anything of enjoyment in the world? Certainly not. This was talking about things that associated the spiritual and religious affiliation. Let us be careful where our affiliations lie and whether we are tying our wagons and tying our fellowships to things that are contrary to the will of God. Let us take heed lest we fall. How do we do that? We recognize that it's not the things of this world that are most important to us. We have the mentality of Paul that says, but I discipline my body and bring it under subjection, lest when I have preached to others, I myself should become disqualified. Thank you for thinking on these things, and we hope you'll join us again next week.
Thank you for taking the time to watch this video. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow us on Facebook for more content like this.